For 5 years, the people in the village beneath Castle Csejte heard the same sound every night, a scream, a young girl's scream, and never the same girl twice. They did not ask where it came from. They did not speak of it the next morning. They closed their shutters and they pulled their daughters closer, and they waited for the dawn. One priest eventually started asking questions. 6 months later, the priest was gone too. Tonight, I open a name that, for 100 years after her death, no one in her own country was permitted to speak. Speaking it was a crime. Writing it was a crime. The court records of her trial were locked away on purpose. Her body, buried in the family crypt, has never been found. Her name was Elizabeth Báthory. They called her the Blood Countess. This is case file number 5. She was born into one of the oldest families in Europe, a family that had given Hungary cardinals and kings, and given the world several generations of madness. She was a beautiful child, and a sick one. She had seizures that threw her to the floor without warning, that left her staring at the ceiling for hours afterward, unable to speak. The doctors of her time had a treatment for this. They would find a healthy peasant, they would open a vein, and they would press the warm blood still moving against the little girl's lips. She was very young the first time. She got used to the taste long before she understood what it was. When she was 6, her father took her to a public execution in the courtyard. A man had been caught stealing, or perhaps insulting a noble. The records disagree. They had decided to make an example of him in a way that involved a horse and a knife and a needle and an hour of screaming that would not stop. The details belong to the 17th century. What matters is what happened in the crowd. Some of them wept. Most of them prayed. Some of them looked away. One person in that whole courtyard was laughing. She was 6 years old. Her name was Erzsébet. By the time she was 13, she was already in trouble. She had fallen in love with a peasant boy from one of her father's villages, and she had become pregnant. Her family did not punish her. She was a Báthory. She was untouchable. They punished him. Her future husband, a man she had never met, a man named Ferenc Nadasdy, to whom she had been promised in marriage since she was 11, heard about the affair and decided that the boy needed to be made an example of. He had the boy mutilated in ways the records describe, and I will not. Then he had him given to the courtyard and to the dogs that were kept in it. The boy did not survive the afternoon. They say Erzsébet was made to watch. She married Ferenc 2 years later. She was 15, beautiful, and the wedding was a national event. Ferenc gave her a castle as a wedding gift. Castle Csejte, on a black cliff in the Carpathian Mountains, surrounded by a forest no one walked into after dark. It was the loneliest castle in Hungary. He had chosen it on purpose. He had chosen her on purpose too. Ferenc Nadasdy was already famous, a soldier so brutal in battle that the Turks called him the Black Knight, and his own men found excuses to ride at the back of the column. He had spent his career studying pain. He had a small library on the subject, and on the morning after the wedding, he gave his new wife her second gift. A pair of leather gloves, soft and elegant, beautifully stitched, with small iron claws sewn into the fingertips. For the servants, he told her, when they make mistakes. He taught her, over the next several years, the things he had picked up at war. 16 of them. The records describe a few: honey in summer, water in winter, fire applied where fire was not expected. The rest, the records do not describe in detail, and neither will I. She learned all 16, and she invented a few more. And then, in the summer of 1601, a woman walked into the castle. She was old. She was thin. She had black eyes that were too bright for her face, and the servants said the ravens followed her, and the cats followed her, and the dogs would not. Her name was Anna Darvulia, and even in her own village they had called her a witch, and even in her own village they had not been wrong. She moved into a small room near the Countess's chambers, and she did not leave it for 9 years. The Countess began to change. The servants noticed it first. Her temper, always sharp, became something else, something hungry. The disappearances, which had been occasional, began to come in clusters. 3 girls in a week, 4, 5. The graves in the courtyard filled up faster than the grave diggers could keep pace with, and dogs began pulling up the shallow ones at night. The local priest started receiving requests for funerals every few days, all for young servant girls, all said to have died of cholera. He stopped believing it. He warned her, gently, that the bodies, if exhumed, might tell a different story. She told him, very calmly, that he was mistaken. The next priest, who arrived the following month, did not raise the question. In 1604, her husband, Ferenc the Black Knight, died in his bed of an illness no doctor could name. She was 44. She was, suddenly, the wealthiest widow in Hungary, and there was no one left in the world with any authority over her at all. That was when it began in earnest. She and Anna Darvulia worked now in the deepest cellar of Castle Csejte. They had a chamber down there, behind 2 doors, lit by torches, where the floor was always wet. The servants who cleaned it learned not to look at the walls. They learned not to count. They learned that whatever they saw down there had not happened, because the Countess said it had not happened. And the Countess was the only person whose word in that part of Hungary mattered. And then, one morning, in the spring of 1604, something happened that changed everything. A young servant girl was brushing the Countess's hair. The girl was nervous, and her hands shook, and she pulled too hard. The Countess turned, and she struck the girl across the face, hard enough that the girl's lip split open. A drop of the girl's blood sprayed onto the back of the Countess's hand. The Countess looked down at it, irritated. She wiped it away with a cloth. And underneath, where the blood had been, the skin on her hand looked younger. She stared at it. She turned her hand. She held it to the light. The skin was tighter, smoother. The faint lines that had begun to appear there in the past few years were gone. She went to find Anna Darvulia. The witch told her what witches always tell women who are afraid of getting old. She told her it could be done. She told her the blood was the answer. She told her the only thing that mattered was getting enough of it, and getting it from the right kind of girl. Young, innocent, afraid. The fear, Anna said, was the important part. That summer, the first girl came up the road to the castle. She was barely a teenager. She had been promised work as a maid. The servants took her down the stairs, into the chamber behind the second door. What happened there took an hour. When it was over, she was empty. And the Countess stepped down into the warm water that had been a girl an hour before. She lay back. She closed her eyes. She stayed there until the bath went cold. She had killed 36 girls before anyone in the village understood what was happening to their daughters. A note before we go on. The trial records do not mention a bath. They speak of beatings, of needles, of cold. The bath came from the villagers, from the women who cleaned that chamber and could not forget. 2 histories were written about her. Only one of them survived. She did this for 10 years, but after the first year it stopped working. She was 45 now, and her hands were getting older, and her face was getting older, and the blood was not enough. She went back to Anna Darvulia. Anna Darvulia had died of a stroke that year. The new witch was named Erzsi, and Erzsi told her something different. "Peasant blood is too thin," she said. "You need noble blood, blue blood, daughters of lords, daughters of barons." That winter, the Countess opened a finishing school. She invited the daughters of the Hungarian nobility to come and live in her castle, to learn manners, to learn etiquette, to learn how to become ladies. They came, with their best dresses, with their best jewelry, with their hopes. None of them came home. In the spring of 1606, a young servant named Pola, barely more than a child, tried to run. She made it 3 days into the forest before they caught her. They brought her back. They dressed her in a white robe. They told her the Countess wanted to see her one last time, and that this was a mercy, because most girls did not get one. They led her down into the deepest cellar. In the middle of the room, hanging from the ceiling on an iron chain, was a cage. It was the size of a small dog. They put her inside, curled up. She could not stand, she could not sit. And then they pulled the chain. The cage was lifted into the air, slowly, and from inside the bars, a row of long iron spikes began to push inward. Polis screamed, and underneath the cage, the Countess stood, looking up, the way a person watches a glass that is slowly tipping over. The servants said, afterward, that she was smiling. There is one more thing the villagers used to say about that cellar, and the historians today will tell you it cannot be true. They said the Countess had a doll, life-sized, painted to look like a beautiful young woman. Long blonde hair to the floor, sapphires for the eyes, rubies for the mouth. Built somewhere in Germany, carried down the cellar stairs in a wooden crate so heavy it took 6 men. It could move. There was a clockwork mechanism inside it. Touch a jewel on the necklace and the doll would smile. Touch another and the eyes would open. Touch the last one and the arms would lift, slow and welcoming, and open, until whoever stood in front of it stepped forward, into the embrace. When the girl stepped in, the arms would close, and the chest of the doll would open, and 5 long iron blades would shoot forward into whatever was inside. The Countess was said to have called her, "my friend." Modern historians will tell you the device cannot have existed. They may be right, but the villagers were not trying to build a museum myth. They were trying to explain what kept happening to their daughters. By 1610, the noble parents of Hungary had stopped getting letters from their daughters. Some of them had sent 2 daughters, some had sent 3. None of them had received anything back. The complaints reached the king. The king sent a man named Gheorghe Thurzo, a cousin of the Countess, a friend of her dead husband. He had sworn, on Ference's deathbed, to look after the widow. He was about to break that promise. He climbed the path up to Castle Csejte in the dark on the night of the 29th of December in the year 1610, with 12 armed men behind him. He stopped outside the gate because he could hear something on the other side of the wall. It was the Countess and the witch, and they were chanting in the cold air with their hands raised toward the night sky. They were trying to put a curse on him. He waited in the dark until they finished. Then he opened the gate. The first body was in the courtyard, not far from the door. A girl, very young, in what had been a fine dress. The second was at the foot of the stairs that led inside. The third was in the chamber at the bottom of the cellar. And what he found in that chamber he refused for the rest of his life to describe in writing. 2 days later, he wrote one sentence in his official report to the king. "I have seen a thing that does not have a name in our language." Her family was too powerful for a trial. Her name was too old. Her uncles were too important. So they did the only other thing they could think of. They walked her, alive, back up the stairs and into her own bedchamber, and they locked the door behind her. Then they brought stonemasons, and the masons sealed the door with mortar and brick. They sealed the windows. They left one small opening, no larger than a dinner plate, through which her food could be passed. Then they went away, and they did not come back, and the castle was silent. She lived in that room for 4 years. We do not know what she did in there. The priests who came to confess her said she was unrepentant and angry, and that she insisted until the end that her servants had done it all without her knowledge. We know she wrote letters, sometimes, that no one answered. We know that her sight began to fail, and her hands began to shake, and that she stopped, near the end, eating what was passed through the hole. On the night of the 20th of August, 1614, she called out to the guard. She said her hands were cold. The guard told her to lie down and try to sleep. In the morning, when he looked through the opening, she was face down on the floor of the room, and she did not move, and she would not move again. She was 54 years old. They tried to bury her in the village church. The villagers refused, so her family came in the night and sealed the body inside the family crypt. Twice in the centuries that followed, men opened that crypt. Both times, it was empty. The Blood Countess has been officially missing for 400 years. In the villages around Castle Csejte, they will tell you she is still listening, waiting. Case file number 5. Closed. But one question is not. Where is she? I cannot answer that tonight. But you can answer something for me, in your town, in your family, in the road behind your grandmother's house. There is a name no one speaks, a story told once and never repeated. Leave it on my desk. I will not answer, but I will read, and the most haunting one, I will open in the next file, without your name, so that whoever sent it knows they are the one being read. I will open the file.